Hi, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are taking a look at Mars's upcoming square with Uranus. Now, this is part of a three-parts. This is the third part of a three-part series that I've been doing on the Mars-Saturn-Uranus T-square, which is perfecting this week. I want to show it to you on the real-time clock first, give you a sense of the timing, and then today we're going to break down Mars and Uranus in particular. We've already looked at the whole combination. We've looked at Mars-Saturn, and now we want to take a look at Mars and Uranus. So before I do that, let me go ahead and pop this up on the real-time clock, give you a look at it. So here is Mars at about 10 degrees Leo coming into an opposition with Saturn at 12 Aquarius and a square with Uranus at 13 Taurus. So how is this situation going to evolve? Well, we're going to see Saturn pass through the opposition or Mars pass through the opposition to Saturn by Thursday, July 1st. And then we're going to see Mars pass through the square to Uranus really between the 3rd and the 4th of July. So July 3rd, July 4th, you see the square from Mars to Uranus perfecting. You could even extend this a little bit and say by Monday of next week, about the next week will be a really strong expression of these particular dynamics. So that is a look at the actual forecast. What we're going to do today is focus in particular at Mars's square with Uranus. Now, Mars's square with Uranus comes after Mars's opposition with Saturn. So I really recommend going back and listening to all three parts of this series for coverage on the Saturn Mars opposition, which will come by Thursday of this week. And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you've got the Mars-Uranus dynamic coming in right in time for the 4th of July. In fact, Mars-Uranus is very much like the 4th of July, and we're going to talk about that in a second here. Why? Because you have the god of war, Mars, the god of action, courage. You have a god that is associated with, perseverance and strength and machismo, as well as action and assertiveness. Mars is a planet that makes us face our fears, and Mars is a planet that deals with things like dominance and power struggles, competition, and so forth. Now, when you put it in combination with Uranus, you're talking about god of revolution, sudden unexpected changes, originality and inventiveness, brilliance, and sort of the need for sudden rapid breakthroughs, the need for individuality and freedom. So when you put Mars and Uranus together, the French and American revolutions come to mind, where you have the idea of a new form of government asserting itself, perhaps leading to bloodshed in the name of independence and freedom and revolution and so forth. So the Mars-Uranus combination, very much like whether it's a coup or a mutiny or a revolution of some kind, just that kind of defiant revolutionary energy with a real like martial push behind it. That's Mars-Uranus. So in thinking about Mars-Uranus this week, along with Mars-Saturn, and again, we kind of combined all three in the first video in this series, there's a number of lessons that came to my mind that I thought would be worth talking about. And these are specific to Mars and Uranus. So that's what we're going to talk about next. Okay, when you combine these two planets, one of the things you have to be really careful of is the feeling, especially Mars and Leo in particular, is the feeling that something has, you're like taking something very personally. And when we take something super personally, it limits what things are and what things could give or share with us. So for example, let's just say that I'm dealing with something in my personal life and it offends me. Now, some people, are going to immediately when I say this, are going to say, well, we do get offended. People do offend us, and we shouldn't ignore it or deny that it happens. So let's just say right away, this teaching is not about saying that we can't get offended or shouldn't be offended, because we're going to get offended. It's part of life. People are going to offend us because people can be jerks, and we could be jerks and offend someone else. So it does happen. It's not about denying its existence, but something can be offensive to us, and we can also sort of open up our hands and say, what else is this? What else is it aside from offensive? I know it's offensive. I feel it's offensive. I could probably easily explain why it's offensive, very rational. And my response on that level is understandable. And, we're not trying to invalidate anything. And because it's not nice, it's not fun to, if someone offends you, to try to tell yourself, well, that wasn't really offensive. You're just being offended. You're choosing to be offended. Like, how annoying is that? No, things are offensive sometimes, right? But this teaching comes from the Bhakti yoga tradition. It comes from, lots of different spiritual traditions will tell us that when we have a sense that there is a deeper cosmic order and flow and intelligence behind all things, then there are many things present in any given event or experience. One of them might be the level at which someone offended us. Someone might have done something that was kind of crappy, and we can acknowledge that, acknowledge our feelings. And we can also, when we're ready, we can sit down and kind of open our hands and say, what else was this? Why else was this here? Why else did this happen? What else is there for me to learn in this? Or not even necessarily to learn, but just what more can this experience give me? What other kinds of insights can it give me? Mars Uranus is sometimes too fast for that. It'll get offended, or it will offend, and then it'll kind of not take the time to see what else is there, to see what else is being given, or what other insights might be naturally arising, not just about the situation or why it happened, but about life or the cosmos or other things that are completely unrelated. It's as though every experience, if we sit with it and allow it to come in, is like a gift. And it's like, my girls we were visiting family this weekend. We went to the beach and up in Duluth on Lake Superior. And thankfully the water was actually warm. And, we were up there, and my wife's aunt had these nesting dolls. They're like the little, like kind of Russian looking. And our girls were playing with them. And, it was just funny because you could see the look on my little 3-year-old's face being like, does it go on forever? Does it just keep going? Because she's taking them apart, and there's another doll, and then there's another doll inside of that one. So, and that's kind of how experience itself is that if we sit with an experience and we kind of just sit with it really and just ponder it and reflect on it and don't come to a conclusion. I mean, we may have some part of our psyche that's already come to a conclusion about it, and that's fine, but we can also continue to sit with an experience, and like nesting dolls, it'll keep unpacking more and more dimensions of the experience. And that's how we grow wise. Because we stay curious with the nature of experiences. And that doesn't mean we just sit there and kind of like, okay, well, what was the lesson? I know there was a lesson. I know there was a reason I caused this. That's not what I'm talking about. It's too linear. What I'm talking about is just letting experience be more than one thing. And Mars in Leo square Uranus and Taurus could be a little too proud for that at times. Maybe there's more that can be said or understood, or maybe there's more that an experience can point us to. And Mars Uranus will sometimes react very strongly out of a sense of pride. Similarly, reactions, this is number 2, reactions can limit what things become. So if we react really quickly or really strongly out of a sense of worry or fear or anger or some really strong emotion, and again, is there a place and time for those things? Yeah, there's the season for everything. But, if we sit with something and let it gestate a little bit longer, it's amazing how a kind of a more thoughtful, if we allow something to evolve just a little bit, just give it a few more hours breathing room even before we react, it's amazing what an experience can become. Reactions often limit what something can become in the flow of time. And that's not actually the definition of freedom. If we want something to be an experience that gives us more freedom, then we have to allow for experiences to be free to express themselves, because experiences are like living entities that we're having a relationship with. The reaction is oftentimes something that puts an experience in a box and then limits what it can become. So again, are reactions bad? No. Are they inevitable? Of course they are, right? But then there's this other truth to remember. So number 3, pushing things through. If you just push, I need something to happen like this right now, pushing things through tends to rip, tear at the fabric of the experience itself. It doesn't allow for an experience to shape us and shape a situation. For example, I'm going to refer to birth a few times because when I was writing this, a number of things that came to my mind had to do with my wife's labor experiences. And, I was obviously there for them and helping her along with the midwife as best as I could. One of the things that they were talking about a lot was how to make sure that women do not tear when a baby is coming out. And this was something that we went through prior to labor and obviously, during the labor itself. And the midwife kept saying, allow for your labor to be what it wants to be. So, and then she would say things like, if you allow this labor to be whatever it wants to be and help guide it, kind of you're helping, but it's your body's doing its own thing. The baby's doing its own thing. This birth is doing its own thing. You, like me, are a midwife. She kept saying that to my wife. I thought it was great advice. And she said, if you push and try to get it out or shape it or own it, it won't give you everything that it wants to give you. And I just thought, wow, that was such a, I felt like I was in like a Zen classroom listening to our midwife. I mean, props to midwives out there and doulas and, of all kinds too, especially, also people who do deal with death. There's death doulas. So at any rate, pushing things through tends to rip and tear the fabric of space-time somehow. That's my observation from my wife's births, where that was the advice that kept coming through. And it just felt so true. And birth was such a prime, for me anyway, it was such a primal, demonstration of this. Now, obviously women have birth in many different ways. So I'm not at all saying that there's only one right way to have a birth. That's absurd, but you get the metaphor, hopefully. At any rate, number 4, if we use our will as a midwife, then what is the will doing? The will is not just pushing something toward a goal or toward a realization of intention. We're not manifesting something, as a word that drives me bonkers sometimes. The will uses patience as well as assertion, as well as relaxing and not asserting. That's all the will. So that we sometimes think that the will is assertion, but the will is as much pulling back as it is about pushing forward. It's as much about waiting as it is about knowing when to do something. So the will is complicated. And a lot of the times we think of the will as just the asserting part, that it's also something that has to do with contraction. There's a little bit of Saturn in there right now. You can feel it. So using the will as a midwife, the will becomes an instrument of not just assertion, but patience and assertion, pushing back and pulling forward in different combinations and permutations. And developing a will like this means being free. That's a Mars-Uranus insight. Number 5, most of us think that pushing through something, now just to flip things around on their head a little bit, we're also told that don't push through something. Just be gentle with yourself. And there's also a time where this may not be the greatest advice, because sometimes we don't push through something because we believe that we have to be ready or we have to be dominant in order to go through an experience. For example, I can't tell you how many people in a yoga studio that we owned for 10 years would come in and say, or we would say, why don't you come and do yoga? And they would be like, I have to get my life in order before I feel like I can come and do yoga regularly. Or I don't feel like I'm in a position where I can meditate regularly. I have to get myself to that place first. And actually, what works better most of the time is sitting down and meditating and sitting and, getting on the mat and doing your yoga or whatever the case might be, because it is the showing up and doing that exercise or activity that helps you get your life in order, not the other way around. So there's also something to be said for sometimes doing things when you don't want to do them. You don't feel like you can do them. You don't feel like maybe sometimes you should do them because you're like, well, what if it's rough or hard or difficult? Or, what if I don't feel ready for it? Or what if I don't feel 100%? Or what if I don't feel entirely in control or on top of the experience? Well, on the other hand, pushing through something, if we're always if we always have to be on top of our experiences and feel totally good about them, then, that reality either puts us on top of everything or feeling exhausted, depleted, and on the bottom of everything. And you know what that leads to? It leads to some really warped ideas about self-care. I'll just say that right now. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. So instead, if we learn to just show up consistently, whether we feel like it or not, with things that are good for us but difficult, they serve us a lot more than if we feel good about difficult things before or as we're doing them. So it's kind of like, I don't want to clean the garage. I want to make sure that I feel really good, that I'm just whistling Dixie when I go to clean out the garage. Well, actually, the garage can clean me out if I don't feel good, but I go and clean it out instead. And that's kind of the part of the magic of Mars Uranus as well, if that makes sense. So, kind of a balance between those two things, pushing through, not pushing through. There's reasons to do both and timing for both. And so there's kind of a Mars intelligence that we can learn through a Mars Uranus transit, knowing, is it time to push through? Or am I pushing too much and I need to like use a different approach to my will? Being discerning about that is not easy, but these transits will really teach us the difference through how we handle things and the kinds of karmic reactions that come up around us. Okay, so number 6, your will is not the measure of your freedom. So sometimes, again, this kind of comes back to this idea that your will is just assertion. And your will is also about when we carefully choose submission. When do we carefully choose service or surrender? And when do we use those things as an exercise of our will? That the more intelligent we become about the use of the will in submission, surrender, or service, all words that people love to think of as negative or evil, that if we can learn that it also makes us strong to carefully use our will to submit, surrender, or serve, then we become really strong. Because our definition of strength becomes diversified, differentiated. It starts to have, it's like a plumage. It starts to grow all sorts of colors around it. Number 7, we are often told, I've noticed, this is just an observation of mine, take it or leave it, but we're often told by empowerment culture, I'm calling it. I don't even know what this is. I'm just making it up. It's just a phrase, empowerment culture. This is stuff I see on social media all the time for 10 years and being in the, kind of new age self-help culture for a long time. I've experienced it. I've consumed it. I've been a part of it. I get frustrated with it. So I'm not trying to stand on some high or get on some high horse about this, but we're often told that expressing yourself, speaking your truth, that's what makes you strong, happy, or powerful. That declarations about your life or what you're doing or changing about yourself online will somehow grant you the validation that you're looking for. And sometimes, that can be fun and necessary. But learning to do things that we feel pride in, that nobody else sees, that don't require a large or public statement or validation, that are done consistently over a long period of time, just within ourselves, will build an inner sense of freedom and ease within ourselves, where the will feels strong in what it is, not in what it does. Because to live with a sense of strength internally that doesn't need to be used, but could be used, that's often where a real sense of contentment and comfort comes from. Well, I know what I could do. I know what I'm capable. I don't necessarily have to do it. That's all internal stuff. And how do we get there if the only way we think about will is in terms of, these external forms of validation or self-expression? I'm not saying self-expression isn't important, or the validation by others for the strong things we're doing or big changes we're making, like telling someone, hey, I'm getting sober, and everyone cheers you on, or says, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm taking, I'm making a life change, and yeah, good for you, to get some friends and stuff like that. That's great. But if we are always about like, look, everyone, tonight I'm just getting a whole bucket of Haagen-Dazs because it's me time. All right. And everyone's like, you do it, like, okay. So the simple point is that learning to build a sense of pride and strength and dignity and freedom within is often something that happens in private through consistent things that we can build and feel proud of ourselves for, that no one else is necessarily seeing or validating. in a sense that it's just God in your heart that's seeing and validating. And that's how we, we really start to, there's like a little effulgence that starts to grow around us. People can see that and feel it. And they go, yeah, like, what are you doing? What do you do? Like, what you seem so calm. People will say that they'll compliment you. You seem so calm, or you seem happy, or you seem like you feel good. What are you doing? What's your secret? And maybe you'll say like, yeah, well, I work really hard on meditating every day, or like whatever the case might be. You might have a place to share it. It's not like sharing is bad, but it feels amazing to build strength in ourselves in things that we do where no one else can see, where there aren't these, kind of puritanical declarations and so forth. So just something to watch for with Mars Uranus, because I feel it come up in me all the time. All right. So injured pride, number 8, handled with dignity, is the first signs of new life. It's like a little butterfly that's starting to poke out of the, is it the chrysalis or the cocoon? So what does that mean? Well, let's say you get your pride injured somehow, but let's say that in that moment, you kind of, well played, universe. Like, I bow, thank you. And you just handle your injured pride with dignity. If you can respond, even if you don't respond that way initially, but you pick yourself back up and you kind of say thank you to the universe on some level. It doesn't have to be in an Instagram post. You can just say thank you. I get them. I got some, that was hard, but thank you. And if you can handle an injured pride with dignity, if you can imagine that in the moments you do that, there is a new, more mature, happier, more settled, content, wiser version of you that's starting to poke out of the cocoon. So think of it that way, because it's exciting when that happens. When you get your pride a little bit injured, and you have an opportunity to respond with dignity, it means that you have an opportunity to respond with an even healthier ego than you had before, an even deeper sense of your true self starting to come through. So celebrate those moments, even as you also feel injured or a little bit wounded by them. You can do both. We are creatures that can hold space for complex experiences. There can be multiple layers or levels to experiences at once. Okay, number 9, being purposefully shocking or defiant tends to only amplify an underlying feeling of being misunderstood. This is something that I want to tell you a story about with my kids. I've learned so much about life. Like, parenting is like, it's like a Taoist training, and it's constant. I mean, as soon as I walk downstairs after I'm done doing all of this, I will walk into a minefield of very particular situations, emotions, feelings, thoughts, requests, attempts to negotiate and barter. Like, there will be all sorts of shenanigans going on when I go downstairs. So what I've learned about parenting, though, is that, like, when my daughter is purposefully tries to shock me or my wife in defiance or whatever, most of the time, like 90% of the time, that is coming from the feeling that the feeling that she is frustrated because we misunderstood her somehow, or that we didn't quite judge a situation correctly. And so what both my wife and I are learning to do more and more in these situations is to kind of go, what's behind this? Are you feeling misunderstood? Did we misunderstand something? And because what happens is, if she acts, let's say my older daughter acts out in a way that's just purposely shocking or defiant, and I just end up saying, well, why the heck did you do that? That doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? It only amplifies and intensifies the degree to which my daughter will become more increasingly, purposely shocking or defiant. And it only increases the feeling within her that she's misunderstood and not seen for who or what she is, or not appreciated for who or what she is. So, and I was like thinking about this when I was a teenager, and earlier, some different stages in my life, and realizing that one of the signs of maturity that in my own life, for me personally, is that there, like, I remember when I first came back from drinking ayahuasca, and I was trying to talk to people about it, and people had a lot of assumptions, and oh my God, you've gone and like joined a drug cult, like you're crazy, stuff like that. And at times I would become more purposefully shocking or defiant or in people's faces about it, because I was feeling misunderstood. I realized that that only amplified the feeling of being misunderstood. And eventually I had a ceremony where the medicine itself told me the more that, these medicine teachings are integrated into your mind and body, the more that you will feel patience for people who don't understand it. And the more that you will find constructive ways of getting people to be curious and interested in it without having to go so full on and trying to convince them or show them or tell them or teach them, make them interested. And a sign of maturity for you, this is kind of the medicine talking to me. I'm just, making this up because it's hard to explain how these realizations come in these ceremonies. But the gist of it was, don't try to be so shocking. The more that you integrate this and just be yourself, the more naturally people will be interested in the very far out nature of these experiences. Just don't, there's nothing to prove here. You have nothing. I don't need you to do or say anything on behalf of me, the medicine says. So similarly, like there's a lot of, whether it's astrology or yoga, or there's a lot of things that are really quirky about the way I live my life. I've got purple walls. I talk on YouTube. I can't just go to the store and people are like, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I'm an astrologer, yogi. And they're like, and you make a living doing this, so I'm used to that for a long time. But what I've found is that over time, the more comfortable I've got in doing these things, the less that I need to be in people's face about them. And the more that opportunities naturally arise for people to actually find out what I do and take interest in some of these subjects naturally, which is great because I think these subjects are very healing and interesting. So anyway, the simple lesson is that the more comfortable we get with things that are really quirky and interesting and that might be provoking in some ways, thought provoking, mind provoking, spirit provoking, the more that we get comfortable with them, the less that we need to rain down on people this these passionate like speeches, or so anyway, I think you get what I'm saying. All right, so I'm going to number 10. Last but not least, as the I Ching tells us, a sudden cloud burst will always eventually come in a stagnant or stuck situation. So stick with it. Just sticking with things. If you stick with things long enough, it's a little bit Mars Saturn again, a breakthrough will come. Now, this is a really important piece that the I Ching also teaches us, which is that try not to act crazy when the breakthrough does come. A sign of someone who acts crazy when the breakthrough comes is a sign of someone who went crazy during the waiting period. And you may not show it during the waiting period, but if a breakthrough comes and suddenly you're just completely dancing around, completely bonkers, that's not a good omen. And how does the I Ching teach us this? Well, let's just think of a breakthrough in your life, in a place where it's truly there's been pent up energy, no denying it. There's been pent up energy, and then a breakthrough comes. So in this moment, the breakthrough, you can think of it as the planting of the seed of a new cycle. So it's very important that even though there's a big rush of energy and there's this new energy that's being released, that you remember it's still a very young and tender space. So if you lose composure during that space, you can feel joy, you can feel excitement, but you can't lose composure during those spaces entirely. Not entirely, at least. Maybe a little bit of composure you can lose. Like, don't lose it entirely. Why? Because if you don't pay attention to details, if you get high on yourself, if you get proud, if you get cocky during such moments of breakthrough, even though that new energy will carry you and it might be a rush and good things might come from it, it might be truly exhilarating and it might be a truly big breakthrough. The likelihood is that the way that you reacted and kind of let go of some quality of dignity and modesty and humbleness within that breakthrough will play out in terms of the eventual fruits of the new cycle. So it's really important that when there's a breakthrough, like, don't go bananas. Let me give you an example. So this is again from the world of parenting. So my girls were really jacked up. I mean, just enthused out of their minds about a popsicle that was coming if they ate their dinner. So, and at long last, the thundercloud burst. They had eaten enough bites. They had completed enough terrible chews of broccoli or whatever the case was. And then the popsicle came. Now they were completely losing their minds. And I was like, this isn't good. They need to calm down before they start eating their popsicles. Otherwise, that frenzy of activity is going to result in someone getting hurt, someone screaming, someone dropping a popsicle in the dirt. I mean, something is going to happen. And that's exactly what happened, because my wife and I were sort of just like a little overwhelmed. So we kind of were like, oh, okay, here's the, yes, you can have your popsicle, and, you can dance like a mad hatter all the way to Paris if you want, so they're like, so the girls are going completely nuts with their popsicles. And one of them, one of my younger girl dropped hers, and the other one, eventually slammed into the other one, and there was fighting that emerged and blah, blah, blah. So we had to settle all of that down and go back to, yes, it's exciting, and let's be sane while we eat our popsicles. So you can think of it like, yeah, maybe the universe is about to rain popsicles on you. Just don't be a fool, because you could drop it. Don't be a fool, because you in your mad popsicle frenzied twirling, you could smash into a wall, and that wouldn't be a good ending. So a sudden cloudburst will always eventually come, but try to live within the waiting periods in life, content with the fact that it might never come, and try to really develop contentment with that. Not because a breakthrough won't eventually come, of course it will, because when it comes, you want to be able to receive it with like a thankful, measured, joyful. I mean, you can let loose a little bit, but you don't want to lose the humility that could tilt that breakthrough in the wrong direction, because it's a very vulnerable and volatile energy when a breakthrough first comes. For example, there was a book or a study or something like that I heard about, and it was talking about the downward spiral that came when people won the lottery. And when they win the lottery, the way that their lives change because of the, kind of spasms of joy and crazy unharnessed spending and loaning, and, kind of this just blows up like that. So, it's truly an archetypal moment where we could fall prey to something like that. So just something to be aware of. That's what I've got for today. 10 insights about Mars Uranus. I hope that they were helpful for all of you. If you live with Mars Uranus energy, if you're very familiar with it, please feel free to leave your stories in the chat box. Always like reading what you guys have to say. And we will be back for lots more content later this week. Okay, take it easy, everyone. Bye.